Good morning, everybody. Marie Lehn is a member of the advisory board of NanoGune and many other things that I will mention a few of them. But he was coming here for 2 days to discuss and to advise us. So we had the idea that why not to use the opportunity to transmit a very simple fact that everybody doing research know, but many people don't know, that many people consider that science is a frozen body of dogma. But it's not. It's an intellectual adventure, it's a human adventure, with failures, with successes. So we thought, why not to have, instead of the brilliant seminars he used to give, he in fact gave a fantastic one in the Einstein Symposium in San Sebastian. I still remember that wonderful sentence that I have used in discussions with high energy colleagues, that Marie Lehn works in the matter that matters. I love that sentence.
5%. 95% you don't know what it is.
Anyway, we have the privilege of knowing him for many years. In addition to be a great scientist, he enjoys the pleasures of life, and among them many of the ones that one can really enjoy in San Sebastian. So he doesn't need an introduction, but just in a few data, he made his PhD with Guy Urison and was a postdoc in Harvard. In 1964, he came back. He has many distinctions, but he's also a Nobel Prize for Physics in '87.
Chemistry, not physics.
Sorry, I was thinking of the Nobel Prize. I was thinking of the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2017. Anyway, so what we want to have is a conversation with him. Particularly, everybody is welcome, but I will begin the questions, and I will ask him to make a very simple summary, if he can, of 5 minutes of what has been your life in science, successes, failures. I asked before in the lunch yesterday, what is your greatest achievement? He has so many, he doubted, but about the failures, he had many, he said, but he has forgotten all of them. Anyway, what is the life? What is just 5 minutes of your life, and then we open the floor for discussion. We are filming it for the web of the Donostia International Physics Center, and the ones who want to ask the question, please take the microphone. And thank you very much, sir, for coming.
Let me first say a few words. I'm very happy to be here. Pedro Echenique is a very good friend. He's a very dynamic person, as you know. I didn't know what I was supposed to do when I came here. So he told me yesterday, oh, you have a seminar. So I said, look, what kind of seminar? You didn't tell me what. So he said a discussion session, and that's what I'm here for. So there will be no formal seminar, but I understand that what you wanted, what you would like, is a discussion with your researchers. And if I can contribute, I'm happy to do so. The discussion is open to any theme. I may not answer all questions. So, what do you want to know?
Would you like to make a summary of, if you will be asking in a television, if you will be asking the French main news program, summarize science and your life in 3 minutes.
Oh,
what
no,
will you
this
say?
is, I say it's not possible. And I think we should have, I know that TV these days, you know, people think that your attention span is only 1 minute, which is terrible. Huh? You know, modern media think people are so stupid that they cannot have attention for longer than 1 minute, huh? Which I think is not the case. No, I was born in a small city in Alsace, then did my primary school there. Very important, I had a very good teacher, primary school teacher. My father was a baker, so he didn't know exactly what to do, and this teacher brought me to high school. So I owe a lot to this person. He helped me to go to high school. Very important. Primary school, one of what we call in France, Troisième République, Third Republic style, you know, where the Third Republic in France introduced education for everybody, school for everybody. And this was very important. This was one of those people who had this spirit. Then I went to high school in a small city next to Rosheim was the place I was born. Aubernay is a little bit larger city close by. I did all my studies there up to the baccalaureate, which I did not in science, Greek and Latin, and philosophy, Greek and Latin. And at the same time, the last year, I did also experimental science. I wanted to study philosophy at the university. And in France, when you want to, at least at that time, you want to study philosophy, they were clever enough to ask those people who wanted to be philosophers to do an exam in science, because how can you do philosophy without science? So I thought to myself, if I do first science, I still have the two doors open. I can go to philosophy, I can go to science. So my first year university was, we call that propédeutique. It's the first year was physics, chemistry, and natural sciences. SPCNS, physics, chemistry, natural sciences. And then I was very much interested in chemistry. I decided to go more to chemistry. And I started the licence, which is the second and third year in the university, in chemistry. And then I had another very good teacher, very important teacher, Guy Horisson, the one I got the PhD with. And he was fantastic. So different from all the other guys were doing, you know, really modern chemistry, exciting. And so I decided to do chemistry because of him and left philosophy on the side. And then I did my PhD with him in natural products, extracting, how do you call that? The white birch. You know what birch tree is? The tree with white, the white tree, huh? Bouleau in French, birch. You have these trees here, no? A tree which is white on the outside. You don't have that here? Oh, come on.
Any French student in the room who can translate?
No. Le bouleau. You have, of course. Of course you have. Interesting. You are physicists, most of you. But that tree, when you scratch it, the white thing, you have a powder. And that powder is 30% of one compound, one chemical compound. Just scratch it, and you can extract it. And I started my PhD with that. Collecting the birch tree, the wood and the outsides, extracting, and it's still the chemistry is done. But it's a very good training, because you start with something you have to find yourself, you extract it, you analyze it, you determine the structure, and then you do synthesis. You make new molecules with it. So this is a very, very good training. So and at that time, I was also a lucky fellow, because it was in 1962, the first nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometers were coming to the labs. And we got one in Strasbourg, and Horisson told me to be responsible for it. So I had to learn a lot of physics, sir. I had to read a lot of physics. Oh, it was hard time, difficult times. But I learned nuclear magnetic resonance, spin-spin coupling, nuclear magnetism, all this kind of stuff. You know the Abraham, huh? Principles of nuclear magnetism. Difficult book. Took me a long time to get at least through it. You know them, Abraham? Very famous book, The Principles of Nuclear Magnetism. Still a very, very good book. So I got my PhD in '63. And then I wanted to go back to more synthetic chemistry, making molecules. I went to Robert Woodward at Harvard, where the synthesis of vitamin B12 was being done. Vitamin B12, you have it in your bodies, is a very big molecule. It took about 60 steps, 60, about 120 people working over 10 years. Very long program, but it was a very big achievement. I was one of those 120. And so that was finished. I worked in '63, '64 on that project. The synthesis was finished in 1972 by other people, of course. I came back to Strasbourg in '64, as you said. Then I was professor there until '79, and then I was elected to the Collège de France in Paris. But my lab was still in Strasbourg. My position was then in Paris, but my lab in Strasbourg. And then that's it.
And that's an
then, you know, that's it.
Okay, now open, the floor is open for questions, comments. Don't be shy.
You know, the thing is, when you are, that's something when people get their PhD, they usually come to me and ask me, now, what should I do? Huh? They're usually, for chemists, there are two possibilities. Either you stay in research, or you go to chemical industry. The reason why I'm telling you that is if you decide to stay in a public institution, research, professor, university, and so on, once you are a professor, you don't move anymore. You have reached your highest level, which means what I tell them is that if you feel that your whole life you can be passionate about what you are doing, then you should be a professor. Because once you are a professor, you don't increase anymore. You are a professor for your lifetime. If you're in industry, you get more money. You are freer. You are seeing yourself, you can advance. Maybe at the end, you're the head of a big company. So all your life, you can progress. But of course, you change all the time, and you have also much less freedom. In university, you have free also. You get less money, but you have freedom. I can go to my lab and say, look, now we do this. Start a new project tomorrow. In industry, you cannot do that. Impossible. People think that industry is more free than university. That's not true. If you are in a lab, in the industry, you have to ask your people above, and it goes through a whole section. Of course, you have also the possibility to have more variety. You start as a researcher, you become a group manager, you become a director of a big lab, then you become a manager of a division, then you become the manager or the research director of the company, and then you become maybe the president of the company. So you can go up and up and up and up. At university, you go to professorship, that's it. And then you have to find the drive in yourself in what you want to do. But you are free. Both choices are all right. I don't say one is better than the other. It very much depends on what you want to do. It's important when you get a PhD to think about this. Because that's the moment where you ask yourself, what are you going to do in your life? What is my life going to be? Of course, you can change from university to industry back and forth. Not so easy, but you can do it. But you have to ask this question.
Don't you think the situation also for professor and research and the public institution is getting closer to the industry in our time? That means you mentioned that you can go to your lab and to put a button and say, okay, we'll do that. But now it's getting difficult that you need support, you need European projects, you know, bureaucracy, you know.
Yes, you're right.
You need money.
Yes, you're right.
Money,
you need money,
yes.
You need, yeah, sure. But you know, all of us who are researchers, they know very well that when you apply for a grant, you already have done 10% of the work you apply for. Because you know, sometimes 90%. Because you have to build up your thing. So in fact, you cannot change your whole lab, but I can still go to somebody, I can go to my lab and say to one or two people, look, we do something different. And you can finance that from what you get for the others. So I think you're right, freedom is less, you have less freedom because you need more money. That's one of the problems. In the older times, I suppose, people could finance themselves. You didn't need so much money, now you need big machines. But that's also why in a university, I think the university should provide the facilities so to let people be creative and not worry too much. You have to get the money. You have to justify the money you get. It's normal. Yeah, the taxpayer gives you the money to do the research. So you have to justify what you're doing, but on the other hand, it is very important for the advancement of knowledge to leave people free. In fact, there's now an extreme coming up, a sort of a reaction against what you just said, that fact that we now need to write projects to get the money from whatever institution, than to write a report every 2 years or 4 years and so on, which, why not? This can be maybe 50, 60, 75, but 2/3 of the projects. But there are now some institutes around the world where they say the following: having too much to do with projects, writing projects can be not very good for creativity. And often evaluation of the projects is very good for intermediate things, but something very original may be considered as no good, because evaluators don't know about. And now there are some institutes around the world, I know one in Germany for sure, where they say, we hire some people who have shown in their past that they are very good. We give them money, we don't ask anything, we let them do. You just let them go. Huh? Maybe they don't produce for 5 years. If they don't produce for 5 years, then you ask a question. And you say, okay, should we keep them? But if people have been doing very good work for 10 years, or 15 or 20 years, there's a very good chance that they will continue doing that. And so in this, there shouldn't be all the universities shouldn't be like that, but a few institutions should give highly creative people the total freedom. Mathematicians know that very well. Huh? In mathematics, that's evident. It doesn't cost much, so you can do it easily. You have these institutes of advanced studies in mathematics, where you just have people thinking. Huh? They sit there, they think. That's what we should do. Huh? We have to spend too much time on things where we do not think so much. It's useful, we have to do it, but we have to be very careful in the balance between. It's a very important question. Or maybe, you know, in an institution like you have here, having some time where you give total freedom to people. Just go ahead, just go. No strings attached. But if you don't do anything, if you sit on the beach, beach here, if you sit on the beach, or even so, mathematicians can sit on the beach. And in fact, if you go to, there is this in California, the institute made by Louis Kahn. What's the name again of the institute? On the Pacific. It's a fantastic place. Not Sunday Barbara, no, in Scripps. It's in Scripps. It's not the Scripps itself. It's a place where the Guillemot is. It's an institute for biology, something like that. It's a very nice setting. No. And they think, they sit there, they do the experiments, and so, you know, it's very difficult. Creativity is something which is very difficult to define. And you have just to try to give the occasions to be able to be creative. But of course, you have to evaluate at some stage.
Yes, please.
I have a microphone already. Telling us about your career, you didn't mention anything about postdoc positions, which is very popular, became very popular, and a lot of students, PhD students, choose foreign postdoc positions simply to rest a little bit longer in research, maybe before deciding whether to go into the one or other direction. So, what is your personal opinion on that? Does that make sense? Is this an important step, a necessary step, or maybe even be disadvantages? What do you think?
Yeah, about postdocs. I think when you do your PhD, that's your first time you do research. And usually you have to focus, you have to get a PhD. So I think for anybody who wants to go to basic research, academic research, a postdoc is absolutely necessary, I think. If you go to industry, it can be different because it is often more focused. You can be hired for, let's say you have done a PhD in polymer chemistry. So a polymer company, we want you to go there because they want to do polymers. But if you want to do academic research, if you have done a PhD in polymer chemistry, you might decide to go to biopolymers, peptides, proteins, nucleic acids, whatever. The other thing is that I usually tell people, if you do a postdoc in an area where you have to learn techniques you do not know, your hands. Because you can always learn in books what is in books, but going in the lab and doing experiments that's something you cannot learn so easily. So I recommend usually go to another area which is experimental. If you're not a theoretician, of course a theoretician is somewhat different. But if you're an experimentalist, then you should really go to a place where you learn new techniques. For instance, I would have liked very much to learn much more biological techniques. I've never done that. I know I can try to learn it, but being acquainted with a topic, the courage to go into a new field depends on how you feel about that, how you perceive the field, whether you know what are the technical hurdles you have to overcome and so on. So to summarize, yes, postdocs are absolutely necessary for basic research, I am convinced, except for really exceptional cases. I would not recommend hiring anybody who has not done 1 or 2 postdocs in basic research. There are exceptions, of course, but in general.
Very shy people today.
If I look at the current funding landscape, it's mostly driven towards consortia, large groups of scientists. Where is the place of the single investigator, do you think? Is there no place anymore?
This depends on the field. If you're a mathematician, easy. Yeah, if you're not a mathematician, if you're an experimental scientist, it's not easy because, there's a lot of competition around the world. You need usually to have a group, can be a small one, can be a larger one. The single investigator, it still works. In fact, I can give an example. In 1987, the Nobel Prize in Physics was Bert Notz and Müller from IBM. They were just 2 people. They did the work, 2 people. They had some technicians, I suppose. At IBM, they must have technicians. But there were 2 researchers, just 2. So I think one can still do it. And maybe in that respect, I would even say this is of course industry, but it was specific, very special. Rouchlikon was a very special laboratory where people were free, which was really an advanced research center. It was not a company, so to say. It was an antenna, sort of a pseudopod of a company where they say, look, you do research, you just think, and just this ideal situation. And they had the possibility to do whatever they wanted to do. And this is something which was extremely productive. Heini Rohrer was the same. You know Rohrer, of course. Yeah. Same thing. Same lab. Rouchlikon also. Binig and Rohrer was also Rouchlikon, which means this idea of having freedom for people and giving them the possibility to do what they want to do if they have good ideas. Not to tell them, people would have thought, I would have said, look, in an evaluation committee, you want to do STM, this kind of thing, this will never work. It shakes, it vibrates, it will never be possible. And it worked. Like Bert Notz and Müller, they found when they read their story, they were close to stopping all research on superconductors. And the 2 last experiments showed them that the oxides had a high TC. So it is still possible, but in most cases, it is not so easy. I can give, in biology usually you need big labs. But there is one case, for instance, Barbara McClintock. She got the Nobel Prize 30 years after her suggestion about jumping genes. She was, I think, almost a loner. But this was many years ago, not now anymore. Now, if you are in biology, you need a big group, because the techniques are very complicated, very time-consuming. Although here also there are the exceptions. One exception I could mention is, I don't know if you have heard about, but since you are a physicist, I give you a little bit information about biology. You know stem cells? You heard about stem cells? Everybody knows about stem cells. Fantastic field, absolutely fantastic for the future. A Japanese, Yamanaka from Kyoto University, together with 1 or 2 persons, was able to show that you can deprogram, you can take an adult cell, and with 4 protein factors which he found, you can deprogram it and make it again pluripotent. That means out of this cell, which was an adult, like a skin cell, you can make an organism again. And it was just 2 or 3 people. He just had the right ideas. This is somebody you should look for, Yamanaka. Fantastic work he has done. That's the future in biology also. Someday you'll be able to make your own heart again.
I remember.
Sure. You put it in the fridge. Oh no, when you need it, you make one and you put it in. This was, you see, let me just add something. People think that the stem cell business, of course it's very modern now, but already in the 20s, Spemann, who was an embryologist. In fact, I became almost embryologist because I had a very good lecture in the first year of the university about embryology, the development of an egg of a frog. It's not exactly a frog, it was a sort of a batracian. Batracian, you know that exists in Spanish.
Patracio.
Voila. So where this fellow already showed at the beginning of the 20th century that if you take an egg of a batracian, let it develop to some stage, you know exactly which part of the egg will give the neural axis, the heart, and so on. And so he took some cells from the place which was later on giving a heart and put it on the other side of the egg, and the animal had 2 hearts. Of course, it didn't survive very long because it was an abnormal, but nevertheless, he showed that cells can begin to be specialized and they are programmed for doing some things. So now people make a big, of course, stem cells is absolutely fantastic thing, but there was a lot of research which is in embryology already which has put the basis for this.
I was going to ask, when you said biology, you are making such a propaganda of biology that maybe all our PhD students go to biology and our labs will be empty. I remember in the...
No, you cannot do biology without...
No,
you have to understand the thing, of course.
I remember in the talk you gave in the Einstein Symposium that one of the speakers before you said that 19th century was the century of chemistry, 20th century was the century of physics, and the 21st century will be the century of biology. I remember you didn't like that because when you began your talk you said that the 25th century also will be the century of chemistry.
So he listens to my talks, fantastic.
So some people say this tendency to predict the future and for fields, I know you don't share that, but could you comment on this?
Yeah, it was a sort of a joke.
Strong sentences?
No, it was a sort of a joke in some ways, but of course biology is the most complex expression of matter. Huh? A thinking organism, like we are sitting here, there's nothing more complex right now. It's the most complex thing the universe has generated. And if we start with physics, with the Big Bang, the universe has evolved and has generated a thinking organism, like what we are. So this is the most complex. But the basis of what we are, of course, the laws of physics. Without electrons and protons attracting each other, you don't exist, okay? Quite clear, huh? Electrons, protons, the Coulomb law, and of course you are doing much more complicated things, but these rather simple electrostatics, that's the basis of molecules. And molecules are the basis of living organisms. So all this is linked together. I was, in this sentence, sort of a half joke, I was just saying that biology, of course, is the most complex expression of matter, but it is based on molecules, therefore on chemistry. But I don't want to be chauvinistic. I think science is science, and we cannot function without physics. And physics doesn't exist without biology, because there are no human beings if there's no biology.
It's a closed loop.
It's a closed loop, sure. I mean, Einstein, of course, is absolutely fantastic, of fantastic importance. But what is very important also is to understand how Einstein can exist. Why is it possible for the universe to generate Einstein? Okay? There is no general relativity without Einstein. And there is no Einstein without matter being able to generate this. So that is a very exciting, this is what I'm mostly excited about, but of course I'm sure we will not solve it in my lifetime, but in the future trying to understand how it is possible on the basis of the laws of physics, the elements which make up the universe, to have evolution leading first to more and more complex forms of non-living matter, and then leading the jump to living matter, which we will understand, I'm convinced, but I don't know why, I don't know when.
I mean, for people like me that are starting now in science, you have any comment about the role? I mean, if I have to decide in what field I should start or what topic, should I follow the fashion journals, papier-mâché journals? Should I follow some internal feeling? How can I manage between getting funding and doing fashion things? Can you comment on that?
There's no real recipe. I think, this is linked to the question you were sort of hinting at also. If I had to start again, what would I do? I'm very happy when I'm doing what I'm doing, but there are many other things to do. And maybe I would be very excited now about neurobiology, the biology of the neural system. It's still a bit early to understand everything, but the functioning of the nervous system, which is the best computer around, still, that is something I probably would like to do. But I'm also interested in architecture. I would be very happy to be an architect. I learned so many interesting things in life. It's very difficult to tell you what to do. Let's say there are some examples where the field changes. We talked about graphene. About 5 years ago, nobody talked about graphene very much. And suddenly somebody found an easy way to make graphene, and now that's a very exciting field. And you can, I don't know, let's take graphene. Maybe you can take graphene and attach some biological groups on it, maybe some DNA recognition sites, and make graphene pieces get together in a given way, self-assembly, self-organization. Lots of exciting things one can think about. I think you have to follow, we have all a training, we are all singular. Each of us has a education, training, genes, society influence. We are interested in different things. I think you should follow what you are most passionate about. The thing you feel you will spend your life on. If you have the choice going to the beach or being in the lab, you do the thing which brings you to the lab.
Passion.
Yeah, I think it's passionate, but of course, scientifically, maybe not just, you have to have, of course, a scientific approach to what you do, but what you are interested in, and hopefully, and I hope this will continue, that these trendy fields will not overcome everything. If everybody does trendy fields, science is finished. If everybody does at high TC superconductors, science is finished. You cannot do, or graphene, or whatever. But luckily, people are different enough so that they are interested in different things.
I remember a sentence by Rutherford in Cambridge who could summarize what you have said. How can you be at the top of the wave? Very simply, because I make the wave.
Ah, that is interesting. That is what Georg Wittig once said. Georg Wittig is a synthetic chemist who was in Heidelberg. He said, but don't follow what I'm telling you now. He said, I don't read the literature, I make it.
It's the same. Who's this guy?
Georg Wittig, W-I. He died now, W-I-T-T-I-G. But don't do that, because we all depend on the other work of others. He just meant that you have to have your own field, of course, but we don't exist. I think what I find fantastic in science is that you are part of an enormous community which builds that in fantastic architecture, which is science. And each of us can bring a stone. Some stones are bigger, some stones are smaller, but I think nobody, if you have brought a stone, your own stone to science, nobody can take it away. That's your stone. One way of justifying why we are around.
I wanted to know, how did you rate going abroad? So doing a PhD in one place or doing the postdoc in another country, or?
Yeah, another country, another lab, totally different as possible. For instance, if you, I think it's very important. Science is very important, but also the climate, the scientific climate, maybe the language, the approach. A Japanese, a Chinese will not react the same way as an American or as a Spaniard, so, or a Basque.
I thought it would take you 1 nanosecond.
And so I think it's very important to go to as far as possible in terms of the topic. If you are, of course, you must be interested in it, the topic, the setting, the university, maybe the language. Language is maybe, everybody speaks English, but okay, countries are still different, hopefully, and they will remain so. So there are very different ways of approaching things. You have to make yourself something unique in terms of the combination.
Role of bureaucracy on science. If I'm more particular,
yeah, this comes back to the question we had also a little bit before.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm more clear, like I'm a student coming from India, to apply for my visa, I need to answer many questions, which in some cases I can never answer.
Yeah, but this is also true for anybody who is not a scientist. So this doesn't make a big difference.
Is any scientific community taking, is there any initiative?
That would be very good. I think in France, we tried to convince the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to make things easier for scientists. And in some extent, we have succeeded. We have a way to go quicker if you are a scientist. But, countries are countries. I think the great thing in Europe now, and this is for the young people here, you are all too young to know that Europe was different countries. When I am in Strasbourg, Strasbourg is exactly on the border with Germany. 20 years ago, you had to show a passport. They checked your car. They asked you, are you bringing goods across the border? And now nothing exists anymore like that. So Europe is absolutely fantastic. You have to realize what it means. I was at a meeting in Tallinn, Estonia, up north. I could rent a car in Tallinn and drive to Lisbon. Nothing asked. Schengen Agreement. Isn't that fantastic? The young people don't realize what that means. That you can go from one country to another freely. I think for you it's normal. It is not normal. It was not normal. And this is absolutely fantastic. So I think with this, the European Union, it's difficult, European Union has also bureaucracy. There are 27 countries. Each of these countries wants to have a say, wants to have an effect and influence. So you have a lot of problems. For instance, at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where the deputies are from Europe, you have to translate into other languages. When you get a piece of paper from there, you have French, German, English, Greek, Spanish, Italian, whatever, and now I suppose Estonian, Czech, and Romanian, Hungarian. Basque. Not Basque for the moment. Don't make it more complicated. But so it is difficult because we have this fantastic thing in Europe that we have a very high diversity, but everybody wants to have something to say. I think eventually we have to agree on 1 or 2 languages. It will not be possible otherwise.
No,
for the official things.
You think the French will be prepared for the 2 languages to be English and German?
I would be happy with it.
You, yes, but the French never.
Let's make it 3 languages. One Latin language, Anglo-Saxon. The Germans may not be so much attached to it because they all speak. In fact, I even think that in Germany, the scientists neglect too much their language. They all speak English. And in fact, sometimes it's even sort of surprising. I was once invited to the anniversary of, it was in Marburg. There was 150th year or something anniversary or something, maybe more than that, of the university. So they had talks by German scientists, chemists, and myself. All the Germans spoke English. I spoke German. Because I thought, look, we are in Germany. You have an old university. Why not speak German? And I think we have to keep our language. But on the other hand, we have to communicate. So we have to have a language which everybody understands. If I go to China, I can speak English. Unfortunately, I don't know any Chinese. I would like very much to know Chinese, but okay, life is too short. So we know that we need a language which can be understood by as many people as possible. But still, it would be a pity if we lost French, Basque, Italian, whatever, Chinese, Indian. And in India, there are at least 200 languages. And some of them, you know, like Telugu, I know India pretty well. Telugu, nobody usually haven't heard about, but there are about 200 million people, or 120 million people speaking Telugu. Huh? So it's not like Spain is a small thing compared to those who speak Telugu.
And in 400 billion, you can be declared non-welcome if you say that. Okay, more students.
Coming back to postdocs abroad and such things, to which extent have you found that different cultures approach scientific questions differently? Maybe you have an anecdote or a story about that.
Different cultures having different approach to questions?
To scientific questions.
I think science at the end is science. So I mean, science is the same everywhere. But the way you approach it may be different. I have no really, I mean, a scientific law, a scientific result, or a melting point of a molecule is the same everywhere. So science is universal. But the way you do the science is certainly very personal. Each of us does it differently. And I'm pretty sure the culture contributes to that also. You have probably a different way, although it gets more and more uniform. This is quite clear also. Just because the scientific way of inquiry goes through steps of doing the work, checking the work, being sure that what you do, you know, all these controls and all that which we have to do, having a good idea is not enough. Democritus invented the atoms. He didn't prove they existed. Huh? So you have to prove in science. You have to be convincing. You have to prove that what you are doing is correct. So the approach to that can be different depending on the country, on the language, I mean, but at the end of it, the proof you have to provide is the same everywhere.
You have written more than 400 papers, several books. You have directed I don't know how many theses, attended hundreds of conferences. Science is very time-consuming, very demanding. How do you compaginate it with family life, with music, with other aspects of life, with philosophy?
I was waiting for that question, but from a lady. Yes, it's difficult. I mean, you are not much at home. You have to have an understanding lady with whom you live. And for men, it's even less difficult than for women, because women are, for the moment, still the way in which humankind reproduces. So they have to have not only the family, but the children, and so on and so on. So I think women have a much harder time than men even. And this is also why being a woman in science is not that easy. The choice is even a much more difficult choice because, as you know, science is very competitive. You have to work very, very hard. You have to be in the lab 7 days a week. You have to be there, and it's very difficult. And for women, it's even much more difficult. So, of course, we should help women to do, because they bring another way of approaching science. At the end, this comes to the question we had about culture. We just have women and men, and the approach they have is probably we are different. We have different ways of approaching things. At the end, of course, science is science, and whether you're a woman or a man, the melting point is the same of a compound, and the final law is the same. But I think it's not easy. It's a personal equation, and each of us has to try to solve that personal equation. It depends on the two partners, how they think about how to do things. And being both man and woman at very high level scientists, there are very few cases. There are some, but there are very few cases. There was one couple, the Cori people, Cori, C-O-R-I, they were both very high level scientists. I don't see many more. They said, no, there's another couple. Right now, there are two biologists also, with Monsieur and Madame are both very, very good scientists. It's not easy. Often also, the very good women scientists are not married. Some of them, at least. Not so much in recent times that changed. Or Marie Curie is the emblem, of course, of and she handled things, but I think she got along very well with Pierre Curie, and they got together very well, because in fact that's a good example of a couple where both people are so successful, Pierre Curie and Marie Curie, obviously.
Well, we see that science fits of everything. Doesn't matter that science fits with everything. Doesn't matter if it's cultural, women's, man's, and so on. But what about the ethics about doing it? Not the big ethics, but let's say the day-to-day ethics.
The day-to-day
ethics.
Ethics,
or the way of the. Do you have any comment about that?
Yeah, I think we have to ask ourselves. You say knowledge is knowledge. And I think science has to, first of all, to advance knowledge. Whatever it is, knowledge is knowledge. But then somebody has to decide how to use it. You can, because of personal reasons, decide not to work in a given area, because the consequences of knowledge in that area can be detrimental. But other people will do it. So I don't think there is a limit to that. Let's look at the atom bomb. That's the example everybody uses. You cannot avoid this. Matter is made in that way. And making energy out of fission or fusion is that it's like that. You cannot go back once you know about. So maybe we could have said, we don't want to know about the atom. We cannot. I mean, the human being, curiosity is driving this. So the society has at some stage to take a decision in which region to go, but knowledge is knowledge. I think science provides the means. What you do with it, that is something then you have to decide in society. The problem which comes up is how rational is a society? For instance, I mentioned stem cells. Many of these opposition to stem cells, mainly coming from this dogmatic, religious, whatever idea that you don't touch life. But what is life? Life is a result of the evolution of the universe. So touching life has no meaning. And we eat animals. We kill for our own life, okay? So we have made decisions already which mean that we admit some ethical decisions, and some we do things which depend on yeah, on the way we use, for instance, let me give you an example which I take. Evolution has given us hands, okay? With the hands, what can I do? I can caress or I can strangle. I have to decide. With the atom, the knowledge of the atom, we can do all these fantastic science and applied technologies, but we can also make a bomb. A knife, with a knife you can kill or cut your bread. So the knife still exists. You cannot go back from that. Let's say, for a joke, one of the most dangerous inventions is the wheel. Without wheel, there are no car accidents. Okay? If you have no wheel, you have no car, and so you have no car accidents. So we have all to live with knowledge. We cannot avoid having more knowledge. We are probably, I think Einstein once said that science has advanced so quickly that we are developed animals. Huh? We are part of the evolution. That maybe we have not been able to adjust fast enough our behavior to the evolution of science. We are still controlled a lot by the old encephalid, paleoencephale, the old part of the brain, which is instinct, which is irrational behavior. So, okay, the front lobes is something we should use a bit more sometimes.
I think, Jean-Marie, in addition to this very important topic that you answer, I think the question can be also interpreted in two additional ways. One is the inner ethics in the production of science that we have witnessed in the last years. Some people who cheat, and that after they have been. Okay. And in addition to that, I think, if I interpret well the question, and if not, you correct me, Andres, is in another level the appropriation of credit. Now the word credit of science. Yeah. Who takes the credit? There are big groups. There are people who maybe don't get the appropriate credit, and these two issues are also.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I forgot. This is a very much more practical way, but I think I should answer that also. On one hand, I think we have to be, of course, as ethical as possible in our own work. We don't cheat. And look, I don't understand these people who cheat, who publish wrong things, because it will be discovered. If they cheat on something which is totally uninteresting, nobody will bother. They can do whatever they want. But if they cheat on something which is an important problem, it will be discovered. Absolutely. So they are stupid, they're crazy. It's something which possibly is, maybe there's some psychological problem, defect in these people, but cheating in science, deceiving, publishing wrong papers, intentionally wrong papers, is something which cannot work. It's impossible. You are discovered for sure, unless you work, as I said, on things which are totally uninteresting. Then it doesn't matter. Huh? But all these recent things which happened in there was some biology papers, there was some physics, the one in science, this thing. I mean, this guy in science, he was crazy. The noise was the same in the pictures. How can you imagine that the noise can be the same in different pictures? I mean, this was incredible. So,
and the credit?
And then the credit is the other point. That's not easy. It's a case to case. We had some contest, some cases where some people, for instance, Nobel Prizes, were forgotten who should have been there, or at least some claimed they should have been there. I don't want to cite names, but I could cite a few cases where some people consider that those should also have gotten credit, and so on. So in a lab, let me give you the way I would react to it. In my PhD work, I went to Guy to work, as one says in the US, for him. but also with him. That's a big difference, for him and with him. In the US, they usually say for him. I prefer the term work with him, with somebody. But I was learning. He was telling me things, so I think the credit should get to him. Of course, I have my contribution, but nevertheless, I think, when I worked with Woodward, I contributed an approach to constructing a small part of vitamin B12, one part of it, which was my contribution. But the big scheme, the big strategy was his. So I consider that I must get the credit of contributing, but I cannot get the credit of doing it, the whole thing. So in a lab, it depends on how, of course, there are quite a few cases where there are people who don't get along. But you have to try to get along with the people working with you. They have to accept that they learn. You have to accept that they contribute, that without them you cannot do anything. I usually do that, I compare that to an orchestra also. In an orchestra, you need a director, the conductor. Without conductor, it's chaos. You need the instrument, the players. Without players, you have no orchestra, no music, and you need the instruments. So I think, for me, a lab is like that. You need the instruments, violins, celloists, trumpets, oboes, clarinets. You need all that. You need those who know how to play, and you need a conductor to put everything in shape. Of course, you need a composer also, but that's something different. But so you need some way of putting things together. So there's very interesting cases where, for instance, in Müller and Bertnotz, to come back to that, there was a very big difference in age, but both contributed, and I think Müller directed the lab, the small group, and Bertnotz make some of the critical experiments. So that was perfectly justified. But in the case, for instance, let's go back to synthesis, like vitamin B12 and so on. Robert Woodward got the Nobel Prize for synthesis. I think the exact labeling was his contribution to the art of molecular synthesis, the art. Because it's nice also how to do things. And this is normal. He probably had directed tens and tens and tens of people who all got sort of credit through him. But he was the one who conducted the thing. So I think that is normal. And each of us should accept that we have a lot of recognition to our teachers. And sometimes we can think that one of our co-workers has such an enormous contribution that it's equal to our own contribution. That sometimes happens. It's a case, again, I cannot give a general answer. It's a case-to-case where the contribution of each has to be evaluated. There are also some cases, for instance, Lisa Meitner. Lisa Meitner, he was a forgotten woman. She was Hahn and Strassmann got a Nobel Prize, but Lisa Meitner should have been on it at that time. At least that's what many people think. I didn't analyze things in detail enough, but at least from what I heard, she should have been on it. Because she did most of the explanation, I understand. Huh? You must know more about
there
that.
There are another three. There are 4 women, but people say should have gotten. One is Shu about the parity of the ranking of the parity. Minor is of course, is the one of the DNA.
Rosalind Franklin, yeah. That's more disputed somewhat, but okay.
About astronomy, but we will not do.
I was curious about the fact that you did your secondary school on classical languages. I understood so.
Yeah.
And I know from at least another Nobel Prize, Anthony Leggett, who was in the same case, and then he moved to science in the high school. I would like to get a comment on that, because here at this moment, when a young boy or girl choose classical language in the secondary school, he closes all the way to do science at the high school. So I would like to
I think
comment
this is very bad. I think one should leave things open as long as possible. One should have ways to go from one to the other. In fact, you know, one reason when I was going to high school, at that time, at least in our region of France, or in France in general, the classical curriculum was considered as much more prestigious than the modern, as was said. Huh? We had, maybe in Spain also, the classical curriculum was considered as the high-level curriculum, and the modern people, those who do physics and chemistry and mathematics, those were considered secondary. So I started, you know, I had no idea, so my parents put me to classical because it was considered as better. Okay, and then I did my high school with Greek, Latin, and philosophy, in the literature and philosophy. But one could, in France, for the baccalaureate, we had 2 sessions, one in June, one in September. And you could get the baccalaureate in letters and classical in June. And if you worked hard, you couldn't get the other one in experimental science in September. That's what I did. So you have your doors open. But I agree with you. I think we should be very careful to let young people, as long as possible, able to choose and not put them in a straight jacket, just to let them. That is not very good. Let them choose. And this, in that respect, I must say, I guess the American system is quite open in that respect. You do lots of different things, and we are sometimes a bit too rigid in Europe, too rigid. We should give the possibility to, look, if somebody doesn't want to study Latin but Greek and mathematics, let them do. Huh? Or, I don't know, English and yeah, of course, in high school, or languages on one hand, and chemistry and physics on the other hand. So, of course, all of us need a sort of a general training. We cannot be totally ignorant in physics or chemistry because we do Greek or Latin. Unfortunately, that's often the case. And nowadays also that it's not very easy to convince people that science is part of our culture. And this is something which one tries to do, giving general public lectures and things of that kind. I often say that, look, people are prepared to spend several hours a week playing tennis. Why don't they spend several hours a week learning science? I have nothing against tennis, but I think science is really part of our everyday thing. Huh? And I'm convinced that if the media make an effort in trying to bring interesting science to the general public, the ones who are not scientists, people will be interested. There are many interesting ways of presenting. You can use, the easiest way is to start with biology, because all of us, there's some fields which are easy. Chemistry is a very difficult thing to bring there. Astronomy is easy. Huh? Everybody looks at the sky. Anthropology is fine too. Evolution of mankind, apes, and all that. Some parts of physics are atomic physics and all that, and of course biology in general. Embryology, stem cells, cancer, and you can use these things as a sort of a pretext for getting more into science. If you tell people that this kind of disease is a disease which comes from molecular origins, then you can sort of attract the attention. But you are right, we have to leave things open as much as possible.
Hi. So during this nice discussion, you talk about the professional freedom that one wins when dedicates its professional life to science, but you also talk about the personal sacrifices that one has to make to be a scientist. So my question is really simple and quick. Is it worth to be a scientist, to dedicate the life to science?
It all depends how you look at your life. Huh? If I want, yes, but it depends. Is it a sacrifice? That's the question. Look, if you are a pianist, huh, you have to train a lot, 10 hours a day. Huh? Is it worth it? I think it's worth for all of us that they are very good pianists. It's worth for all of us that they're very good scientists. And these people, they must make some sacrifice in other things. But doing one thing, you're 24 hours a day, that's it. Huh? So if the days had 48 hours, would have be very nice. If you could do without sleeping, I always considered sleeping is a waste of time, but now the neurobiologists tell you that's not a waste of time because you continue thinking and redoing your brain networks and all that. So yes, I think it is worth, if you want to do basic research, it is worth it. I can consider that you also want to do applications of science or so just to make your living and then to do something else. If you want to be at the forefront of what's going on, you certainly have to sacrifice other things, that's for sure. So make your decision, okay? But you will enjoy it if you have things which things succeed. But there are lots of times where it is not all that successful. And okay, there are lots of times. You never talk about things which do not work. Huh? You only talk about things which work. But there are other professions which are very difficult. For instance, let's say a composer, go back to music, a modern composer. What do you do when you are a composer? What is new? What is it compared to Beethoven, Schubert, and more modern Wagner or Ravel or Villa-Lobos? What do you do? It's not easy. Or a painter or a sculptor. What is your way you can do it? In science, we can at least know how to build on things. We know the science around. We know what can be new combinations and so on. So I find the life of, if I were a composer, the life would be very difficult, even worse than being a scientist. Maybe the composers have another opinion, the reverse opinion.
With this beautiful comment, we end up this very nice discussion, and I'm sure I'm speaking for all of them, thanking you very warmly for giving us such an hour of pleasure and of brilliant thinking. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.